Joe Gocher here, Alliance Auto Care, Alliance G-Wagon. I'm here to talk to you about your older G-Wagons. Here we're going to answer a question. We've got an older truck in, and some of the questions we get asked is, I've got a high mileage older G-Wagon that doesn't handle very well. I'm going to talk to you about the 3 things you can do that will drastically transform the way your truck handles and drives and rides going down the road. So let's get into it. Here we've got a 1999 G500. It's a Europa truck, and it's got almost 170,000 miles on the clock. It's been on the block a few times. It looks good. It feels okay, but we've done a massive transformation on this truck. So some of the things we've done is tires play a huge role into this. If you've got old tires that are past 10 years old, get them off there if they're done. They just don't compress and ride the way they should. So that's number 1, is tires. The second part of the equation is going to be your suspension. So this is where we're going to talk about shocks and springs. There's 2 parts to the equation. The springs do the job of physically holding the truck up off of the ground. That's what keeps it off of the bump stops. That's what absorbs the bumps and actually suspends the truck as it's going down the road. And it actually supports the weight of the truck. So if you have a truck that's really loaded down with a bunch of off-road camping gear or overland stuff, you're going to need a heavier spring. If you've got a truck that's fairly lightweight and just goes down the highway, you're going to need a lighter spring. So choose accordingly. The second part of that suspension equation is going to be the shocks. And that's where things get a little bit convoluted. The shock's sole purpose is just to damp the truck from going up and down. So if you hit a bump, it's meant to stop that wheel from continuously traveling up or traveling down, or just to keep the truck doing this. It's meant to keep the truck stable on the road, so when you make a correction, it stays put. And that shock selection is going to vary based on tire size, again, gear, how the truck's loaded and configured. So that's the second part of the equation. The last part of the equation that really changes the way the truck handles going down the road is going to be the steering and front axle in these trucks and the overall bushings. Typically, we see these bushings last, give or take, 100 to 150,000 miles. As they get up in age, they get a lot more play and they get a little bit of looseness. So when we talk about front axle and steering, it's not just the bushings for the suspension, but it's also the tie rod ends, the steering knuckles, and overall condition of the front axle swivel balls. And that actually keeps everything nice and tight in line and puts it back to factory specs. So again, to recap, the 3 things that can keep your older truck going down the road that's going to make it feel nice and tight and new again is going to be tires, choose wisely based on terrain, suspension, which is shocks and springs, and then the steering and front axle chassis components, which is going to be bushings, steering tie rod components, and possible swivel balls, kingpins, things of that nature. There you go. Again, Joe Gocher, Alliance Auto Care, Alliance G-Wagon, here to keep your G-Wagon on the road.